A dense mist hung over the forest, thick enough to mute the usual sounds of the wild. The towering pines stood like silent sentinels, their branches heavy with dew, shrouding the forest floor in deep shadows. The air was damp and rich with the earthy scent of moss and fallen leaves. A chill whispered through the trees, but the wolf was unfazed. He had long learned to live with the cold. The black wolf's territory stretched for miles through the dense woodland, a place few creatures dared to enter. He had roamed these lands for years, an unchallenged alpha, and in his prime, there was no animal, no predator that dared to threaten his pack. But the forest had changed. The echoes of his ancestors' songs now seemed distant, and the once clearer paths had become uncertain and dangerous. Something was shifting in the air, something he could feel but could not yet identify. He moved through the underbrush, his fur blending into the shadows, muscles rippling beneath his sleek black coat. His sharp amber eyes scanned the landscape, instinctually alert to any disturbance. His ears flicked back and forth, attuned to every rustle of the leaves, every snap of a twig. He was alone now, having led his pack through countless trials, but they had slowly dwindled, one by one, to the harsh realities of life. The forest was no longer as forgiving as it once had been. A sudden sound pierced the stillness, a distant crack followed by a low, mournful growl. The wolf's body tensed, ears perking. The growl came again, closer this time. His heart raced, his breath steady but quickening. He knew that sound. It was the unmistakable growl of an intruder, and this time it was not the usual wandering bear or lone cougar. This was something different. The forest felt smaller now, constricted by the weight of uncertainty. The wolf moved forward, his paws silent against the soft earth, following the sound. His body moved with the grace and precision of a predator who knew every corner of his domain. He had survived countless hunts, faced the fiercest threats, and ruled these woods with an unmatched ferocity. But tonight, the silence that had once comforted him now gnawed at his nerves. He reached a clearing, the moonlight cutting through the trees and illuminating the space in a pale, ghostly glow. It was here that he first saw it, a strange figure in the distance, crouched low in the brush. The shape was large, too large for a typical predator. Its silhouette shifted in and out of the moonlight, obscured by the swaying trees. The wolf's instincts screamed at him to move, to retreat. But something held him there, his amber eyes fixed on the figure. A slight breeze carried the scent of the intruder, sharp, unfamiliar, and laced with an unsettling undertone. The wolf's hackles raised, his body stiffened. He couldn't move yet, not until he understood what it was. The shade grew clearer as it stepped into the moonlight, and the wolf froze in recognition. It was another wolf, large, but not like any he had encountered before. Its fur was a pale silver, almost white, and his eyes glowed with a cold, unnatural gleam. This was no ordinary intruder. This was a rival, a force unlike any he had faced. The black wolf's chest tightened as the realization hit him. The silver wolf circled slowly, eyes never leaving the black wolf's. It was a challenge, and there was no question in its posture. The black wolf could feel the weight of the fight ahead. This was not just a territorial dispute, it was a test of survival. As the silver wolf approached, the tension escalated. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the usual sounds of nocturnal creatures fading into the background. The black wolf's muscles coiled, ready for the battle, but he knew he could not win this fight alone. His pack, the pack he had once led with such strength, was no more. His body was growing older, slower. Time had worn him down. The silver wolf lunged first, sharp teeth bared, but the black wolf was ready. They collided with a force that shook the ground beneath them, fur flying, claws raking through the underbrush. The sound of teeth snapping and bodies crashing echoed through the trees, a brutal symphony of struggle. The black wolf fought with everything he had, but the silver wolf was relentless, faster and stronger with each passing moment. Blood stained the earth beneath them, the scent of battle thick in the air. The black wolf's movements were growing slower, more calculated. He could feel the weight of each blow, his strength draining with every strike. The silver wolf's eyes burned with a cold intensity, its resolve unyielding. Then, in a moment of desperation, the black wolf made a move he had never considered before. With a final, fierce burst of energy, he twisted his body, throwing the silver wolf off balance. It was a gamble, a last-ditch effort, but it paid off. The black wolf sank his teeth into the silver wolf's throat, feeling the rush of victory for a fleeting second before the world around him began to blur. The silver wolf writhed beneath him, but the black wolf's grip was ironclad. He held on until the struggle stopped. And then, all was still. The black wolf stood over the fallen rival, panting heavily, his body trembling from exhaustion. The night was eerily quiet now, the tension that had gripped the forest easing into an uncertain calm, but the victory felt hollow. His energy was spent, his body broken, and though the forest was his, it no longer felt like home. As he turned away, the sound of something moving through the trees caught his attention. It was a low growl, familiar yet distant, not from any predator, but from his own pack. A reminder of the days long past. His pack was no more, but the forest still carried the memory of what it had been. The black wolf's heart ached as he limped away from the clearing, his head low, his body heavy with the weight of both victory and loss. The forest stretched before him, silent once more, as he disappeared into the shadows, the last of his kind to roam these lands. The mist returned, swirling around the ancient trees, and the wolf silhouette melted into the night, fading from sight. The forest, it seemed, would continue without him. But the land he had once ruled would never forget the black wolf's last stand. As the black wolf disappeared into the shadows, the forest seemed to reclaim its silence. The mist thickened once again, swallowing the clearing, hiding the fallen rival beneath a veil of fog. Yet, despite the stillness, something felt off. A subtle shift in the air, a presence, faint but unmistakable. The black wolf pressed on through the dense underbrush, his paws dragging, each step heavier than the last. His muscles burned, every movement an effort, but he pushed forward with a stubborn resilience born of instinct. The forest, though a vast and intimate expanse, now seemed unfamiliar, as though it had turned against him. There was no comfort in the shadows, no reassurance in the rustling of the leaves. The wind no longer carried the familiar scent of his pack, nor the sense of the creatures he had once observed from the safety of his den. It was as though the land itself had forgotten him, as though he no longer belonged. Ahead, the black wolf stumbled across the familiar stream that bordered his territory, a once reliable landmark, a place of solace where the sound of the water had once calmed him. The moonlight gleamed off the rippling surface, but there was no reflection of the wolf, no sign of the proud creature he had once been. His dark coat, drenched in sweat and blood from the struggle, was now matted, and his breath came in shallow, labored gasps. He lowered his head to drink, the cool water providing a temporary reprieve, but as his gaze shifted over the forest floor, he noticed something. A series of tracks. The imprints were fresh, deep in the earth, too deep to belong to the typical animals that roamed these parts. The black wolf's ears flicked back instinctively. The shape of the tracks was unmistakable. They were not from a bear, not from a cougar, nor any other predator that might frequent the forest. The tracks were from another wolf. But this one was larger, far more substantial than any he had ever encountered. The black wolf felt a pang of dread course through him, a chill colder than the air itself. This presence wasn't a rival. This was something older, something ancient. He followed the tracks, his steps now cautious. The faint scent of the unknown wolf lingered in the air, pulling him deeper into the forest. It wasn't a threat he could immediately identify, but the very nature of the scent felt invasive, unnatural. It was as though the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. The moonlight barely pierced the dense canopy above as the black wolf trudged deeper. The air grew still, almost oppressive, as if the trees themselves were listening, waiting. His pulse quickened as the strange tracks became more pronounced, leading him to a part of the forest he had never ventured before. An ancient grove, surrounded by twisted trees that seemed to rise like ghostly fingers from the earth. In the center of the grove, a low, guttural growl vibrated through the air. It was not from the silver wolf. This sound was older, richer with malice, deepened with time. The black wolf's heart raced. He had felt something in the forest shift, something ancient and powerful, and now he had found its source. Emerging from the shadows, the black wolf finally saw it, the creature that had left the tracks, the enormous wolf whose presence had threatened everything he knew. It was no mere beast. It was a spectral figure, its coat a shadow of darkness, its eyes glowing with an eerie green light. Its size dwarfed the black wolf's own, and the power emanating from it felt unnatural. This was not a creature of the wild. This was something else, something primal and timeless. The black wolf's legs wavered as he realized the truth. This was the guardian of the land, an ancient spirit that had long protected the forest, not a rival seeking to claim territory. The eerie growl was a warning, a declaration that the balance had been disturbed. The ancient wolf, whose very presence seemed to draw power from the earth itself, stood before him like a judge, its eyes filled with an unspoken understanding of the black wolf's struggle. There was no fight to be had here, no battle of strength or cunning. The black wolf, though proud and fierce, understood that he was not meant to defeat this force. Instead, his purpose in this moment was to pass the torch, to acknowledge the end of an era and the beginning of another. His time had come, and the forest had chosen its next guardian. As the two wolves locked eyes, the air shifted, as though the land itself recognized the change. The black wolf, now weakened from his battle and worn from the years, lowered his head in a quiet, solemn gesture. He had fought the good fight, had survived, and had protected what was his, but his time in this world was drawing to a close. The forest was ready for a new protector, and he would not be the one to stand in the way. The ancient wolf let out a soft, low howl, the sound reverberating through the grove, rich with power and finality. The black wolf raised his head once more, gazing one last time at the forest that had been his home. The trees, the stream, the mist, they all seemed to bow in reverence, acknowledging the passing of an era. With one final, weary step, the black wolf turned and began to walk into the shadows of the grove, the mist swallowing him whole. He did not look back. His last stand had been fought, his place in the world secured. And as the ancient wolf stood alone in the center of the grove, the forest seemed to breathe again. The presence of the black wolf, though gone, lingered like an echo, and the forest, ancient, wise, and eternal, began its slow, inevitable turn. The new guardian watched over it, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. In time, the land would heal, but for now, the forest stood still, keeping its secrets, waiting for the future to reveal itself. As the black wolf disappeared into the fog, the forest fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the soft rustle of the leaves in the distant treetops. The ancient wolf, still standing in the center of the grove, stared into the thickening mist, its luminous eyes flickering with an unsettling light. The night stretched on, the moonlight now blocked entirely by the dense canopy, leaving the forest bathed in a somber darkness. Time seemed to slow. The breeze carried the scent of damp earth, and the scent of the black wolf, now fading, lingered in the air. There was no sign of the new guardian moving, no sound of paws scraping against the forest floor. The moment felt endless, suspended in a place beyond time, where the only thing that remained was the faint heartbeat of the ancient forest and the quiet pulse of nature. In the stillness, a soft growl broke the silence, a low, rumbling sound that echoed from the shadows, a reminder of the power that lay hidden within the forest. It was a sound that reverberated deep in the earth, sending shivers down the spine. A predator, drawn by the disturbance in the natural order, had entered the territory, but this predator was different from any the black wolf had ever faced. Which, if the school described decorum correctly enough, had. The forest shifted again, responding to the new presence. Branches creaked as something large moved between them, and the scent of a foreign creature filled the air. The ancient wolf turned, its eyes narrowing, its body coiling with tension. Something was amiss. This wasn't just another animal, it was a challenge, something that threatened the delicate balance of the land. The growl became louder, the sound of claws scraping against stone, the rustle of leaves underfoot, as the creature made its way closer. The ancient wolf's fur bristled, a protective instinct rising deep within its core. It was not a rival seeking to claim its territory, but something more dangerous, an intruder, a creature that should not have been there. From the shadows, a dark shape emerged, a creature not entirely wolf, but not entirely something else either. Its coat was a patchwork of grays and blacks, its eyes glowing with an unnatural amber hue, the light within them flickering with a cruel intelligence. This was a wolf, yes, but it was twisted, corrupted by something outside the natural order. The ancient wolf tensed, its muscles rippling beneath its fur. This was not the way of the land. The creatures of the forest followed their own rhythms, their own patterns, and this creature was out of place. The intruder stopped just beyond the clearing, its amber eyes locking with the ancient wolf's glowing gaze. There was no fear in its expression, only the promise of violence, the hunger for dominance. The growl rumbled from deep within its chest, vibrating the air, but the ancient wolf stood still, unwavering. For a long moment the two wolves faced each other in the quiet of the grove, the wind still and the forest holding its breath. The tension in the air was palpable, as though the entire forest were waiting for the first move. Then, with a sudden flash of movement, the corrupted wolf lunged forward, its jaws snapping as it sought to close the distance. The ancient wolf reacted instantly, its body twisting with a fluidity born of centuries of experience. The two wolves collided, their fangs clashing with a sharp, violent crack, the force of their impact sending shockwaves through the ground. The corrupted wolf's strength was formidable, its movements fast and erratic, but the ancient wolf was a master of the terrain, using the forest itself to its advantage. It darted and weaved, its powerful limbs propelling it with incredible speed, while the intruder struggled to keep up. The fight escalated, a violent ballet of teeth and claws, each movement a carefully calculated strike. The ancient wolf's blows were precise, focused on weakening its opponent. It was no longer just fighting for survival, it was protecting the very essence of the forest, the delicate balance of nature that had existed long before either of them. But the corrupted wolf was relentless, its rage building with every missed strike, every cut that only seemed to fuel its anger. It had no respect for the natural world, no understanding of the consequences of its actions. It was a creature bent on destruction, and the ancient wolf could sense that if it did not stop it now, everything it had fought for would be lost. In a final desperate act, the ancient wolf lunged, its powerful jaws sinking deep into the intruder's throat. The corrupted wolf let out a strangled cry, but it was too late. With a swift and decisive movement, the ancient wolf tore into its foe, a final act of strength and resolve. The intruder collapsed to the ground, its body going limp as the life drained from it. The forest seemed to exhale, the tension that had hung thick in the air dissipating as the corrupted wolf lay still. The ancient wolf stood over it, its chest heaving with exertion, its glowing eyes darkened in sorrow. There was no victory to celebrate. The battle had been necessary, but it had come at a cost. The balance of the forest had been disrupted, and it would take time for the land to heal. The ancient wolf turned its gaze to the trees, to the stream, and to the endless, unbroken expanse of wilderness that had always been its home. It was time to continue the watch, time to protect the forest from those who sought to unmake it, from the forces that lurked in the shadows. And with the moon now shining brightly through the treetops, the ancient wolf stepped forward, its movements purposeful and steady, ready to carry the weight of its role. The forest had been tested, but it would endure, and the ancient wolf, its dark coat glistening in the moonlight, would remain its guardian, forever and always.